Donald Trump broke through the Democrats' blue wall in 2016, but a new NBC News Marist poll shows some trouble for Republicans in the Midwest. In the battle for control of Congress in the 2018 midterms, Democrats have a 9-point lead in Michigan, a 12-point lead in Minnesota, and an 8-point lead in Wisconsin. As for voters' opinion of the president's job, he's down at 36% in Michigan, 38% in Minnesota, and 36% in Wisconsin. A majority of voters in all of those states disapprove of the job he's doing. Asked if the president deserves re-election, about 3 in 10 in all 3 states say yes, and about 6 in 10 say no. So Eugene Robinson, Eugene Scott. I've watched my Eugene Washington Post writers. I get confused. I'm so sorry. We're used to having Eugene Robinson here. This obviously was the key to victory for President Trump. You look at a state like Michigan, a state like Wisconsin. By the way, he almost won Minnesota as well. How concerned is the White House as it looks at these polls?
Quite concerned. I'll actually be in Michigan next week talking to voters. And a poll I wrote about yesterday, that was a Marist poll, said one of the biggest changes is actually with suburban women. These are women who were boarded the Trump train, should we say, because of Ivanka and some of the women surrogates, and honestly because of some dislike towards Hillary Clinton. But there is no Hillary Clinton now, and so we're seeing a lot of these voters looking at Donald Trump and concluding that they don't like what they see, and the only person that they can blame it on is the president themselves.
So, Bill, what do you see in these numbers?
Yeah, no, I think there's some, for all the talk of how he was doing so great, and he's consolidating the Republican base, he's consolidating a slightly smaller base than existed 2 or 3 years ago, because the number of self-described Republicans has shrunk by about 3% of the electorate, which isn't huge, but it's, 28 to 25, it's 10% of Republicans deserving.
And those independent numbers are striking.
The independent numbers are horrible, and you need those in those suburban districts. There were 2 or 3 districts that could flip in Michigan, 1 or 2 in Minnesota, so it's interesting that the midterm, who do you prefer to control Congress numbers are so bad there. And for me, the final point I'd say is the re-elect, I've always thought this, he has like 38% approval in some of those states, but 30% think he should be reelected in 2020. You can somewhat approve of Donald Trump now. You don't like Hillary Clinton still, retrospectively. You like the Supreme Court nominations, you like the tax cut, whatever. But that doesn't mean you want an additional 4 years of Donald Trump. So whatever happens on November 6th, I think on November 7th, 2018, we're in a sort of new political universe because it's a prospective choice. What do you want for 4 more years, not justify your vote against Hillary Clinton in 2016 or justify the fact that you've been defending Trump with your neighbors, for the last 18 months. So that's the re-elect being so low is striking.
So one thing we have to remember, we have to preface this is Donald Trump running against nobody, right? I mean, so people have this idealistic, if it's my ideal candidate, of course I would vote for that candidate. And I was listening to 2 people last night in a restaurant, they were talking about Donald Trump, and this gentleman was listing off all the things he loved about Donald Trump, and then his friend asked him, would you vote for him again? He said no. And it was very surprising.
It's interesting. There was a focus group, a colleague of mine did just in last week in Ohio, which exactly had, it was all Trump voters. Sort of reluctant Trump voters, a lot of suburban women that Susan's been talking about, and they were asked, do you approve? Yeah, more or less, better than the alternative. I hate the media, whatever. I don't like I don't like Nancy Pelosi. But what about 2020? I'm not so sure about that.
Well,
11 of the
Dan
12.
Balz did
So that's
a
interesting.
huge story for the Washington Post, and one of the things he talked to a lot of Trump triers is what he called them, and there were a lot of people willing to try Trump out of frustration, not just because they hated Hillary Clinton, but they were frustrated, and those were Republicans and also some Democrats who said, let me just try, it can't get much worse. And I think that's also what we're seeing in those numbers. We're seeing, I tried it and I don't like it.
Eugene Scott, if you look at our NBC Wall Street Journal poll, I would remind people that the President of the United States has an 88% approval rating among Republicans. So I guess what we're talking about here is a few of those reluctant Republicans and some independent voters in the middle.
Absolutely, and I think it's important for people to remember that Republicans make up only about 25% of the population. Most people are independents, and so while there this group, these really conservative Americans who really do align with what they see coming out of the White House, the overwhelming majority of Americans do not, and all these polls suggest that they will perform differently this fall.
Look, I think there's 2 other small things just to remember here. One is that I think there's a lot of concern, at least among people I talk to, about who is it Trump's going to be running against in 2020. Yep. And there are a variety of potential Democratic candidates that actually could push some people.
And Republican primary candidates.
And Republican
the Nikki
primary.
Haley, the Nikki Haley, Donald Trump, the Nikki Haley, Donald Trump primary is going to be lit. It's going to be lit, you know.
It's going to be lit.
Spoken by her campaign.
Was she there last night?
But the second thing I would just mention is that if you parse through all the way through Trump's policies, it is very hard to find anything that is actually going to help the voters who elected Trump. That Midwestern guy or woman in manufacturing who lost his job, is working in a copy shop, making $15 an hour instead of $35. Find me something in what Trump has done that is going to make their life better, and then you throw trade on top of it and the farm states and all the rest of it. There's a lot. People haven't yet processed that, but that's, I think.
Yeah, I hear you on that, but I'm just not convinced that the people who love Donald Trump are going to be convinced that the Democrat running against him is on their side.
Yeah, but the people who are running, but those people are a small number. The people who love Donald Trump.
Yeah, maybe, but again, back to the point, who's he going to be running against?
Eugene Scott of the Washington Post, great to have you with us. Thanks so much. Bill
you.
Kristol, also known as Fat Joe's new pal. Thanks for being here, my friend.
Good to
That's amazing.
He stole your shades before the segment.
I lent them to him. You know, he wanted to look a little more cool.
You borrowed it from you. Still ahead on Morning Joe, the Trump administration banned a reporter from a Rose Garden event yesterday after she asked the president questions about Russia and Michael Cohen. NBC News chief White House correspondent Hallie Jackson gave us some perspective on that. The New York Times' Peter Baker also will weigh in on that and much more when we come right back.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.